Hello, what we're going to be covering in this exercise is how to go ahead and use the interactive shell in idle. So in order to go ahead and launch the interactive shell, let me go ahead and press on the start button and let me go on down and scroll down to Python, and I will go ahead and click on Python idle. And what that does is that brings up the interactive shell. So in the interactive shell, you can go ahead and type in the various commands. A window with the 3 greater than signs prompt should appear. That's the interactive shell. So what we're going to be talking about in this lesson are expressions, data types, and variables. So if you want to enter an expression, you can just go ahead and type the following. We're going to just type in 4 plus 4. And we will go ahead and hit the enter key. So in Python, 4 plus 4 is called an expression, which is the most basic kind of programming instruction in the language. Expressions consist of values such as 4 and operators such as the plus sign. And they can always evaluate, that is, reduce down to a single value. That means that you can use expressions anywhere in Python code that you could also use a value. In the previous example, 4 plus 4 is evaluated down to a single value, which is 8. A single value with no operators is also considered an expression, though it's evaluated only to itself. So if you go ahead and type in 4, it'll evaluate to 4. So what we're going to do next is we're going to walk through the various operators that are available in Python. So we've talked about the plus operator to do addition. If you want to do a subtraction, you would just put 8 minus 7, and that will reduce down to 1. Multiplication is 2. And then what you want to do is you want to click on the asterisk key, the star key, or I call it the splat key, to go ahead and do multiplication. And that'll go ahead and evaluate to 8. If you want to go ahead and do division, it's 6 divided by 3. And that will evaluate to 2. Exponent, so if you want to go ahead and raise a number to a specific power, you would just type in my case, I want to do 2 cubed, so you would specify 2 asterisks or splats, and what that should be is the number 2 cubed, which is 8. If you want to do the mod, basically what the mod does is it returns the remainder. So if you go ahead and type in 15 mod 4 and hit enter, basically what that does is it takes 4 into 15, it goes in there 3 times, that equals 12. 15 minus 12 is the remainder, which is 3. So that is the mod function. If we go ahead again, take 15 divided by 4, that'll equal 3.75. And if you want to do integer division, so if we go ahead and take 15 and then we want to divide by integers divided by 4, what that does is that basically takes 4 into 15 3 times and it gets rid of the remainder. So what we have is we have a value of 3. If you type in 2 and then times 4, which you usually see in mathematical books, that will give you an invalid syntax error because in order to do multiplication, you need to go ahead and use the asterisk, star, or splat. The next thing we're going to do is talk about precedence or mathematical operator precedence. So if we type in 2 plus 3 times 6, what that will do is that'll return 20. Basically how that occurs is 3 times 6 takes place first because multiplication has a higher precedence over addition, and so 3 times 6 is 18, and then 2 is added to that. So if we go ahead and take a quick look at that, we'll just go ahead, click on next step. So what it does is the first step is 3 times 6, which is 18, and then it'll go ahead and add 2 and 18. If you wanted to actually go ahead and you wanted to add 2 plus 3 first, what you would do is you would surround that operation in parentheses and then times 6. So what that does is basically parentheses have a higher precedence than all mathematical operators. So anything, the operation within parentheses gets done first, and then after that the operation outside of parentheses gets done. So 2 plus 3 gets added together, which is 5 times 6 is 30. If we go ahead and walk through this, 2 plus 3 is added together, which is 5. You take that times 6, and what you get is 30. So let's go back here. Another more detailed one, we'll go ahead and write in 5 minus 1, and then we'll take that times, and then in parentheses we'll take 7 plus 1, and then we'll divide that by 3 minus 1. So if we go ahead and hit enter, that evaluates to 16. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to walk through that. So first thing that gets done is the parentheses on the left hand side get evaluated first. As in all equations, they evaluate from left to right. The next step would be 7 plus 1 gets evaluated next. And then since 3 minus 1 is in parentheses, that'll get evaluated next. And then 8 divided by 2 is in parentheses, so that will get evaluated next to 4. And then we'll take 4 times 4, which turns out to be our answer of 16. So mathematical operators highest to lowest precedence, it would be the exponent, then the modulus, remainder, integer division, division, multiplication, subtraction, and addition. The best rule to follow is when in doubt, add parentheses, because parentheses have precedence over any of the mathematical operations. So if you're in doubt, I would go ahead and surround your expressions in parentheses to make sure they get evaluated first. So if I go ahead and type in 6 times, basically what that'll do is that'll produce an invalid syntax error. Again, if I type in 40 plus 6 minus times 6, again, that's invalid syntax because we have 2 operators. You can always test to see whether an instruction works by typing it into the interactive shell. Don't worry about breaking the computer. The worst thing that could happen is that Python responds with an error message like it did in the past 2 expressions. So what we're going to talk about next are data types. So expressions are just values combined with operators, and they always evaluate down to a single value. A data type is a category for values, and every value belongs to exactly one data type. The 3 most common data types are integers, float point numbers, and strings. So what we're going to do next, at the command shell, we're just going to type in a -5. Since that's a whole number, you enter that. Python will basically treat that as an integer. If I enter 30, again, that's an integer value. You can tell because it's just a whole number that's getting displayed. If I go ahead and enter 3.14, that's a floating point number. Anything that has a decimal to the right of the decimal point will be considered a floating point number. And you can have negative floating point numbers, negative 1, 2, 3. That'll evaluate to a negative 1, 2, 3. Again, if I just type in 30, Python treats that as an integer. However, if I go ahead and add 30.0, Python will treat that as the float because we've added a decimal place and a decimal point and a digit to the right of the decimal point. So Python programs can also have text values called strings. You always surround your strings in single quote characters so Python knows where the string begins and ends. So let me just go ahead and type in hello world, and what that'll do is that'll go ahead and print out a string. You know it's a string because the value that gets returned is enclosed within single quotes. You can also enclose strings within double quotes. So if I go ahead and type in goodbye world within double quotes, it returns that as a string value. The plus is the concatenation operator for strings, so you can go ahead and add two strings together. So if I want to add John and Jane, I can just go ahead, put a plus sign in, and what that does is concatenates the two strings into one string. You can go ahead and replicate a string by using the asterisk, star, or splat. So let me just go ahead and type in John. And if I want to go ahead and repeat John 4 times, I can just multiply it by 4. And what it'll do is it'll create a string with John specified for 4 different times. The next one, let me see, I'm going to go ahead and type in goodbye. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and add 5 exclamation points after goodbye. So I will just add an exclamation point and then multiply that by 5. And what that does is that adds 5 exclamation points to my string goodbye. If you go ahead and say if you want to try and use the replication on 2 separate strings, John times Jane, that will return an error message. You can't multiply sequence by non-int of type string. And then if I want to go ahead and multiply Alice times 5.0, that'll return an error because basically the only way you can replicate a string is to multiply it by an integer. In this case, we multiplied it by a float. So what we're going to talk about next are variables. So a variable is just a box in the computer's memory that can store a single value. So it's just a location in memory that stores a value. You use an assignment statement to store values in variables. So if I go ahead and specify spam equals to 24, what this does is it initializes the variable and stores 24 in spam. So if I go ahead and specify spam, what is stored in that variable location named spam is the value, integer value of 24. You can go ahead and override the variable. So what we have is we have spam initialized to 24. If I want to go ahead and send it to a different value, a string called hello, I can just go ahead and now spam is now equal to hello. You can also go ahead and use concatenation. So if I want to go ahead and add hello world, I can just go ahead and type it in, and basically it's now hello world. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to set spam equals to goodbye. And if I go ahead and display that, spam is now goodbye. If I go ahead and add spam plus world, so what it does is it basically substitutes whatever is stored in spam and concatenates it with space world. We get goodbye world right now. So if I go ahead and type in spam, my value of spam is still goodbye. The one thing you cannot do is if I want to go ahead and basically you cannot assign to a literal. So what we're doing here is we're trying to assign spam to 4. You cannot do that. What in this case, spam is still set to goodbye. So if we wanted to set spam equal to 4, we would have to specify the literal value on the right, and now spam is 4. And throughout various books on Python, you'll see the variable name spam, eggs, bacon. Basically, this comes from a skit that Monty Python put together. You might want to go ahead and do a search on YouTube for spam and Monty Python, and it'll go ahead and walk you through that skit. So that's all I wanted to cover for the interactive shell. So what we've covered in this exercise is we've kind of went through how you can type in expressions in the interactive shell. We've talked about expressions. We've talked about operators, the precedence of operators, the various most common data types, and then the other thing we talked about was variables. So that's all I wanted to cover in this video. So we will talk to you next time.